Shiro here for Umbra Games with a review of War for the Overworld on PC, requested by @JaceWOverly via Twitter. This game was developed by Subterranean Games, who began this project as diehard fans of Bullfrog Productions and EA's Dungeon Keeper series, the first released in 1997 and the second in 1999. On the cusp of asking EA for rights to use the Dungeon Keeper intellectual property, the team changed their mind and their assets, instead to try for something new, a spiritual successor as it were. One Kickstarter, a Steam Early Access, and a few years later, out comes War for the Overworld. I've always loved and have started Dungeon Keeper several times since 1997, but I'm not sure I actually ever finished it. The last attempt was a couple years ago, as they're still available on Good Old Games' website, GOG.com, but that 480 window resolution, it's pretty tough to work with these days. And for some reason I've just never gotten around to 2 at all, but let's review. War for the Overworld is best described as a real-time strategy game, or RTS. You are a newly reawakened dungeon overlord on a task to plunge the Empire and the Overworld into darkness and ruin. You're guided by the disembodied voice of Richard Ridings, the narrator from the Dungeon Keeper games, on a quest to squash rival Dungeon Keepers, search for an artifact of great power, and kill the Emperor. All you see of yourself is a cursor in the shape of a hand. You begin each level of the campaign with a dungeon core and some worker imps. You can click on dirt tiles and have the imps clear spaces where you can set down various rooms at the cost of gold. Gold is initially gained by mining dirt tiles that contain it, or by finding a gold shrine where it can be harvested and stored in a vault room. You begin the game with very few room choices, but each section of the dungeon you add will draw new creatures once a gateway has been discovered and acquired. The lair rooms give your minions a place to set up a home, the slaughterhouse produces micropigs for them to eat, add an archive and cultists will come to study. Make a beast lair and soon various atrocities of all kinds will move in. As the game progresses, you can use the Veins of Evil, which sort of functions like a skill tree, granting you access to new rooms, spells, and abilities in a pretty limited manner. Now, each campaign level will give you more options to unlock on the Veins of Evil through the accumulation of sin studying done by your cultists in the archives, but it kind of gets a little confusing. It's pretty restricted on what you can learn when, and even once you have something in certain levels, sometimes abilities or rooms won't be available. I don't know, I love my skill trees, but in War for the Overworld, I think a simple notification as you progress would have been sufficient. Once you've acquired minions, while you can't control them directly in the godlike mode, you can set up a rally flag, allowing you to direct them to a specific area where they will fight enemies and break down doors. Your minions will then essentially tackle just everything in the area. I'm sure it sort of fits the style of the Dungeon Overlord that you can't pick a specific target and have your troops attack just that one, like your average military RTS, but the lack of direct targeting did get a little debilitating at times, especially when troops start leaving combat because they're hungry or sleepy. One of the things I love most about Dungeon Keeper that continued in War for the Overworld is the ability to possess a minion, launching you into a first-person view. Unfortunately, I didn't find it as helpful in this game, as a lot of instances I was dealing with 10 enemies at a time, with up to 25 or 30 of my minions, where my time seemed better spent casting the healing spell on a group of them. Things were just a bit too chaotic and fast-paced to get much use out of it. As minions kill things, they gain experience and consequently level up and get stronger. You can also build arenas and barracks for your beasts and other minions to train in respectively. Your collection of spells ranges from casting lightning, to an area of effect heal, to defense repair and berserk on your minions. There are quite a few spells, and that's not even mentioning the ones obtained through the ritual altar. There are also constructs available like bringing dirt back that you accidentally mined, or bombs to destroy brimstone, and also ember demon summoning. Each map has a victory condition and lose condition, although most of the time your lose condition is simply your dungeon core being destroyed. While the majority of the main campaign's 13 stages encourage building a robust dungeon and sending minions forth to stop a resident threat, one has you traipsing through a giant crypt with no room construction at all, simply building up minion armies with the necromancers resurrecting ghouls from tombs. A couple other levels have pretty strict time requirements, encouraging you to attack and destroy without the ability to build much support. Now, Dungeon Keeper balanced your dungeon size based on the number of gold you could mine from the map, as opposed to the Overworld's often discovered unlimited gold shrines. Perhaps they merely just chose to balance this with the aforementioned time limit in a lot of cases, but by the time I finished the game, I feel there were several things I'd unlocked as the points became available that I just didn't have time to use because of these time limits. For example, the torture chambers in prisons. If you have a prison room, instead of an enemy unit dying, they will be subjugated and appear inside once their HP is drained. You can then pick them up and drop them onto devices in your torture chamber. After a set time, they'll change sides and fight for you. Once a battle started, though, I'm not even really sure I saw them at a rally point. It just felt more effective to build other rooms that would attract minions that can be just as powerful and not require 2 rooms and scrolling back to prison and then torture chamber to do it. There are spells you can obtain that let you turn prisoners into gold statues, which can be used for cash, but gold's never a problem. And once again, you're in the heat of battle, and it's difficult to switch back and forth to issue commands like that quickly and effectively. I mean, I barely had enough campaign to mess around with the alchemy labs and potions or the ritual chamber craziness either. All that said, though, the campaign itself does feel more cohesive, with an actual plot rather than just laying waste to increasingly difficult underground castles. And the varied objectives do keep the gameplay fresh. I mean, at least I finished this game. While Writing's narration is a bit more animated and emotional over the calm psychosis of his character and the Dungeon Keepers, British guys with deep voices are always a pleasure to hear. Rest in peace, Tony J. Each campaign level has 3 Steam achievements rewarding you for completion, as well as offering up a time trial one and an optional objective like destroying things or finding hidden shrines. This throws in a bit of replay value, allowing you to choose your stage at any time from the Overworld map. You can also save the game mid-dungeon if you need to take a break or if you're going for a risky move. Now, if I truly wanted to explore the game's features and abilities more in depth, there is a skirmish mode, a map editor, and online multiplayer modes available. The humor in Overworld, though, is pretty solid, from its dark sarcasm and the micro-pig feeding to your troop, to funny loading screen quips, to the random comments the narrator makes during a level.
Some of your creatures are trying to form a union.
You know, I think they actually did give him a name, as one of the other NPCs called him something, but even if I did remember what it was barely pronounceable. I did a quick check of reviews for War of the Overworld for the game's release in April of 2015. Most destroyed the game for crashes and bugs. I didn't have a single crash during gameplay, so somewhere between release and current version 1.4, they've tidied up their code a bit. I did have a few things to mention, though, about the quality side. The first is a random game stalling for a second or so, about every other minute. I'm not sure if the game was trying to catch up and keeping track of all the movements or what. It seemed to happen more in the crypt stage without all the dungeon building, so I'm not entirely sure what's behind that. I mean, my PC is pretty hardcore, making me pretty positive it's not on my end. Another thing, which I couldn't tell if it was really intentional or not, was sometimes units would just go rogue and just kind of stand around. Now, if it was one of my units, I could right-click and smack it, and it'd start moving again, or get angry and leave my dungeon. But there were occasions where enemies would do that as well, so I don't really think I can blame it on minion personality. Finally, as I was steamrolling the final stage, some company came over, so I saved mid-dungeon to return the next day, and was getting a virtual function not found error for 2 different saves I had made, setting me back about 40 minutes. Not sure if it was a corrupted save or what. While there have been a few attempted successors to the Dungeon Keeper name, even an EA attempt that suffered a pretty big fan assault on the microtransaction-heavy mobile game, none quite hit the spirit like Subterranean Games has. You can definitely see the effort put into recreating this classic game and updating it, and I'd definitely recommend snagging it, especially if you can find it in a Steam sale. Rated as a real-time strategy on my true 1 to 100 scale, with 50 being an average game, War for the Overworld lands at a 67 out of 100. This is Jiro for Umbra Games. Thanks for watching. Classics, remakes, and spiritual successors. You can find their hashtag objective reviews here. Feel free to subscribe for notifications, or follow me on Twitter @Umbra Games.